So some of you probably already recognize this particular case. This is the Fractal Design Node 202. This is a mini ITX case, and Fractal was good enough to send that over to me to sort of take a look at, and eventually we're going to be building a nice Ryzen gaming PC within this very small chassis. So let's go ahead and get this thing out of the box. Now obviously you guys have a top-down view right now, and there will be some B-roll to go along with this so you can get a better look at everything. But just off the bat, it's a really minimalistic design. The front side of it is very subtle. The power button is, sort of placed front and center. Two USB 3.0 ports with a USB 3 header for your motherboard, a microphone, and an audio jack. Also, I know not a lot of people are going to do this, but you'll notice if you lay it in this orientation, just the horizontal orientation, a monitor would very easily sit on top of it, especially if it's not an overly heavy monitor. I know most people aren't going to put it in that configuration, but if you are tight on space, you could use this as sort of your own monitor stand, which would also put the front panel ports right in front of you. It is a thought if you're considering building a very small form factor PC to save space. Now you'll notice on the top of the case there's also this one vent. You probably don't want to cover that up, because the one thing that little PCs like this will sort of fight against is heat, and it does appear to be like a dust filter on the inside of the case. However, you will have to take apart the case to get that and to clean that, but it is there in case that is very important to you. Flipping the case upside down, we have another long vent. This vent would be the one to cool your graphics card compartment, and then there is another small vent on the motherboard and power supply side of things. This particular one, I believe, and we'll have to take a look, would be for the power supply itself though. Moving on around to the back side of the case, you have your two expansion ports. Most of you will be occupying these with a single graphics card, and then of course you have your I/O area for your motherboard, as well as the plug for your power supply. However, the power supply does not sit right here. It's actually just an extension cable. It takes the power around to the actual SFX power supply. In this case, I have a 450 watt power supply, and that was included with the case. On the left side of things, we do have some ventilation along the bottom, but otherwise nothing there. And on the right side of the case, we do have more ventilation on this side as well. And of course, for the case, Fractal does provide a vertical stand, which is a very nice, just simple design. You'll want a hard, flat surface. I wouldn't recommend putting this on carpet because it may want to tip over depending on how well you have it centered. Now, to actually get inside the case, you're going to want to take off 4 Phillips head screws. It is definitely not the friendliest mechanism I've seen for getting into a case, but with a case like this, I don't foresee you swapping out parts a whole lot unless you're just an enthusiast like myself that may pull parts on a regular basis just to test things out. But the vast majority of everyone, I believe, won't be swapping parts in and out of this case very often. Then once those 4 screws are out of the case, the top will just simply lift off, and it does appear to be a mostly, if not wholly, plastic top shell on the case. I take that back. It's definitely metal on the top. It's actually just shrouded. The sides are plastic, but there is a metal plate on the top side of things. So there's that. So inside the box we have our mounting hardware. Most notably, we have a riser card, which will help us mount our graphics card in this compartment here. The motherboard will go over here, and of course, like I already said, the good people at Fractal Design were nice enough to send a version of this case that actually already has a 450 watt power supply included. However, you can get a version without that and then buy your own SFX power supply. Now, the nice thing about getting the power supply included with this particular case is everything is sort of already run to the length you're probably going to need it anyways. A good example here is these 2 SATA connectors. You have 2 2.5 inch drive bays that can be mounted on either side of this sort of center rail. This bracket supports 1 on each side, and these 2 SATA power connectors would fit very just nicely, 1 on each side here, and don't give you a lot of extra unneeded length, which means this entire little area over here that you would probably use for cable management with a bigger SFX power supply with longer runs on the cables, you may not need so much space, and it's possible that this could help airflow with these shorter runs that are custom made for this case. Of course, here is the power cable to actually plug your computer into the wall. That's actually kind of important if you don't have many of these laying around. So this drive caddy actually has one screw on top. It's not toolless or anything. You actually have to use a screwdriver to get it out, but it also uses a little bit of a rail system here on the bottom, has 4 mounting points that you put it into those and then slide it forward. And then the screw doesn't actually hold the caddy down. Those 4 points do. The screw just prevents it from sliding back out. Now, if I sort of turn the case up here, you can see that this sort of hole in this rail here is where you're going to pass through any larger cables that you'll need. But if you're a follower of Bitwit, another YouTube tech channel, Kyle there actually used this area to pass through an all-in-one water block, except that he had to cut out this rail altogether. What I would recommend doing if this ends up being the route you take, because you need a short graphics card on this side to give you enough mounting space for the actual 120mm radiator. But if you're planning on buying this case and doing something similar, instead of cutting this rail out completely, I would just cut this out wider so you don't lose the structural integrity that this whole rail provides, but it then would give you enough room to pass through the water block from the graphics card side and route it through the hole by making it a little bit larger. That may be possible. That, however, is not something I would recommend doing, but it is an option available if you're a modder and it's something that you've seen from Kyle's channel and you are interested in doing something similar. Now, I don't want to go through this without pointing out what the power supply offers aside from just the 450 watts. It offers a 24-pin ATX power connector, your main connector. It offers the 8-pin EPS connector. You have 2 SATA power plugs, one for presumably a couple SSDs, but you could also use a 2.5-inch laptop hard drive, which is an option that I think I'm going to be going with along with an SSD. And finally, you have a PCI connector for your graphics card that features 2 6+2 pin plugs, so you can run, if it actually has enough power to power it, you could run a graphics card that required 2 8-pin connectors. However, then your limiting factor is probably going to be the 450 continuous watts that's provided by the power supply and not so much the power connectors that it offers. Sort of one of the last things I want to point out with this case is the actual amount of cable tie-down points you have, which is actually somewhat impressive. The only downside may be that you're going to be limited on using fairly thin zip ties if you do go that route. But there are cable tie points all around the perimeter. So there are a lot of cable tie-down points that you can utilize to keep the cables as tidy as possible to promote airflow, because again, with a case this small, airflow is going to be really important. So now let's take a look at what's in the mounting and accessory box. So we do have some zip ties provided by Fractal in the box, which is nice to see. And we also have rubber feet provided by Fractal, and that's in case you're going to just use it in the horizontal position that's sort of sitting in already. You can just peel off these feet and put them on the corners so you have padded feet that way. Otherwise, you can just slide it into the vertical stand as shown earlier. And of course, here is our riser card, which is a 2-part solution. The riser card actually has 3 mounting screws, one here, one here, one here, and you can sort of see these 3 holes in the mounting card. So what you will do is, the first part, once the motherboard's installed, you actually mount this part of the riser card and secure it down before passing through this second part of the riser card to allow you to actually mount your, and I actually have that backwards, to actually mount your graphics card into the case. So it is a 2-part riser card though. And that's a quick overview of the Fractal Design Node 202. There is a build vlog coming with this particular case in which I'm going to sort of transfer everything from my Ryzen 1600 build over into this particular case. It'll make it a lot easier for me to take this on the go with me when I want to. And more importantly, it will clean up the look of my living room setup much more once this is sitting in the entertainment center and sort of out of the way. And I will leave you with a little bit of a shot of just how small this is compared to something like a PlayStation 4.